In the world of the wealthy, there are two kinds of riches, the kind you can count it and the kind you can't. Eleanor Vance had plenty of the first kind, more than she could ever spend. Her name was etched onto the tallest building in the city, Vance Industries, a global empire she had built from nothing but grit and a brilliant mind. But as she stood in her mansion, a palace of silence, she knew she was the poorest woman in the world. Because the one thing she couldn't buy, the one thing she cherished most, was her grandson's happiness. Eleanor's grandson, Julian Vance, was the CEO of her empire. He had her mind for business, her drive, her ambition, but somewhere along the way, he had lost his heart. She watched him on magazine covers, saw him in boardrooms, a king in a glass castle, but she also saw him at family dinners, his eyes distant, a polite smile hiding a profound loneliness. He was surrounded by people, but he was utterly alone. The women he dated were like polished statues, beautiful to look at, but cold and empty. They loved his name, his power, his money. They didn't see the man. They saw a prize to be won. Eleanor knew something had to be done. Julian was a good man, but he was blinded by his world. He couldn't tell the difference between gold and gold plating anymore. He trusted no one, and for good reason. How could he? When every hand that reached for him wanted something in return. One evening, her loyal butler of 40 years, Arthur, found her staring into the fireplace. "You're thinking about Mr. Julian again, madam," he said softly. Eleanor turned, her eyes filled with a sudden fire. "I'm not just thinking, Arthur, I'm planning." She explained her idea, an idea so audacious, so insane, that Arthur nearly dropped his silver tray. She was going to go undercover. She would strip away the Vance name, the fortune, the power. She would become invisible. She was going to become a janitor at her own company. "If I want to find a woman worthy of my grandson," she declared, "I need to see how people behave when they think no one of importance is watching. Character is what you do in the dark." Arthur was aghast. "Madam, it's undignified. It's dangerous." But he saw the look in her eyes. It was the same look she'd had when she closed her first $1 million deal against all odds. It was the look of a woman who would move mountains for her family. He sighed, a small smile playing on his lips. "Very well, madam. What will be your name?" Eleanor looked at her worn, wrinkled hands, hands that had signed contracts and held her newborn son. "Ellie," she said. "Just Ellie." The plan was set. The richest woman in the city was about to disappear, all to find a treasure more valuable than all her stocks combined, a true heart for her grandson. She knew the world saw her as a fragile old woman, a relic of a bygone era. They had no idea the strength that still resided in her bones, the fire that still burned in her soul. She wasn't just going to observe. She was going to create a test of kindness, a test of humility, a test of character. And the entire company, from the top floor to the bottom, would be the testing ground. Julian would never see it coming. He was busy looking at spreadsheets and stock prices, completely unaware that his life was about to be changed forever by the woman mopping the floors outside his office. The game was afoot, and Ellie the janitor was ready to see who would pass the ultimate test. The process was meticulous. Eleanor Vance, the woman who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, had to vanish. Her tailored silk suits were replaced with a coarse grey janitor's uniform, several sizes too big. Her elegant silver hair was hidden under a drab, unflattering wig. Her manicured hands, which had shaken hands with presidents, were made to look rough, with dirt worked under the nails. She practiced stooping her posture, shuffling her feet, and keeping her eyes downcast. The hardest part was learning to be invisible. For a woman who had spent a lifetime being seen, fading into the background was a painful lesson in humility. Arthur helped her create a believable backstory. Ellie was a widow who had lost her pension and needed the work to survive. It was a story tragically common, making it tragically believable. The first day was a shock to her system. She entered Vance Tower not through the grand marble lobby she had designed, but through a cold, steel service entrance in the back alley. The smell of disinfectant and stale coffee replaced the scent of fresh flowers that usually filled her world. No one held the door for her. No one made eye contact. She was just part of the scenery, a ghost in a grey uniform. She was assigned to the executive floors, Julian's floors. It was a deliberate choice. She wanted to be close to the heart of the action, to see the people who orbited her grandson every day. Her supervisor, a gruff, overworked man named Sal, barely looked at her. He just grunted, handed her a cart with a squeaky wheel and pointed her towards the hallway. "Don't touch anything on the desks. Don't talk to the executives. Just clean the floors and empty the trash. Got it?" Eleanor, now Ellie, simply nodded. As she pushed her squeaky cart down the pristine hallway, she felt a wave of emotions. It was jarring to see the world she built from this new perspective. The employees rushed past her, their expensive shoes clicking on the polished floors she was supposed to clean. They were so absorbed in their own worlds, their phones, their ambitions. They didn't see her. She was just an obstacle to be walked around. She passed the marketing department, where a group of young, sharply dressed executives were laughing. One of them, a beautiful woman named Madison, glanced at Ellie with a look of faint disgust before turning back to her friends. The look was a tiny dagger to Eleanor's heart. This was the world Julian lived in, a world of casual cruelty and performative charm. She reached Julian's office at the end of the hall. The door was closed. She could hear his voice inside, firm and commanding. For a moment she was just a grandmother, wanting to knock on the door and tell him to eat his lunch. But she wasn't Eleanor anymore. She was Ellie. So she just cleaned the glass wall outside his office, her reflection a ghostly figure against the backdrop of his success. She was closer to him than she had been in years, yet she had never felt so far away. The transformation was complete. She was no longer a queen in her castle, she was a spy, and her mission was just beginning. She had traded her kingdom for a mop and bucket, but she knew what she was looking for, and she wouldn't stop until she found it. The days bled into a routine of anonymity. Ellie would arrive after most of the employees had left, her world one of quiet hallways and the hum of fluorescent lights. She became a student of human nature, watching from the periphery. She learned more about her company in 1 week as a janitor than she had in 10 years from the boardroom. She saw who stayed late because they were dedicated and who stayed late just to be seen by the boss. She saw who left their coffee mugs for someone else to clean and who rinsed them out themselves. These were the small things, but Eleanor knew that character wasn't found in grand gestures. It was found in the million tiny choices people make when they think no one is watching. Her first significant encounter was with Madison Sinclair, the beautiful marketing executive she had noticed on her first day. Madison was often one of the last to leave. One evening, Ellie was cleaning near her desk. Madison was on the phone, speaking in a loud, saccharine voice. "Oh, Julian, you are just a genius. That idea was brilliant." She laughed, a sound that was perfectly practiced. As she hung up, she noticed Ellie nearby. Her sweet demeanor vanished instantly. "Can you not make so much noise? I'm trying to work," she snapped without even looking up. Ellie just murmured an apology and pushed her cart away. Later that night, she found Madison's trash can overflowing with expensive takeout containers and half-eaten salads. On the floor next to it was a spilled coffee. Madison hadn't bothered to clean it up. She had just left it for the invisible woman she assumed would take care of it. Then there was Isabella Rossi, Izzy, a young graphic designer, often found working late in her small cubicle, surrounded by sketches and color palettes. Unlike Madison, Izzy's space was tidy. One evening, Ellie was wheeling her cart past Izzy's desk. The squeaky wheel was particularly loud that night. Izzy looked up from her screen, but her face held no annoyance. She just offered a small, tired smile. "Long night, huh?" she asked. Ellie was so taken aback by being spoken to as an equal that she hesitated. "Yes, miss. A long night," she replied. Izzy stood up and stretched. "Please, call me Izzy, and thank you for what you do. This place would be a mess without you." She then walked over to the small kitchenette and returned a moment later with a cup of tea. "I made some extra. Thought you might like one," she said, handing the warm cup to Ellie. It was a simple gesture, a cup of tea. But to Eleanor, it felt like a drink of cool water in a desert. It was the first act of genuine, unprompted kindness she had received since her transformation. She looked at Izzy, who had already gone back to her work, lost in her passion. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't performing, she was just kind. Eleanor stood there for a moment, holding the warm cup, her heart aching with a fragile, burgeoning hope. The lines were being drawn, not by wealth or position, but by simple human decency, and Eleanor was watching every single stroke. Weeks turned into a month. Ellie's presence became a normal part of the after-hours scenery. She continued her silent observation, her opinion of the two women solidifying with each passing day. Madison treated her with consistent disdain, either ignoring her completely or issuing sharp commands. Izzy, on the other hand, always had a kind word. She'd ask Ellie about her fictional grandkids. She'd share a piece of chocolate from her desk drawer. Small, insignificant acts to anyone else, but to Eleanor, they were everything. It was time to move beyond observation. It was time for a direct test. The plan was simple, designed to reveal instinct rather than thought. One evening she saw Madison and Izzy leaving their departments at the same time. It was the perfect opportunity. As they approached the main hallway, Ellie positioned her cart and, with a convincing "oops," tipped over a small trash can, spilling its contents of crumpled paper and coffee stirrers onto the floor. It was a minor mess, easily ignored. Ellie feigned embarrassment and a bad back, groaning slightly as she bent down slowly to pick up the pieces. Madison saw the mess, rolled her eyes in dramatic annoyance, and skillfully maneuvered her high heels around the scattered trash without breaking her stride. She didn't offer a word, not a glance of sympathy. It was beneath her, a problem for the help, not for her. She was already mentally out of the building, probably on her way to a dinner where she could talk about how hard she worked. To her, Ellie and her spilled trash were nothing more than a momentary, unpleasant sight. Izzy, however, stopped. She saw the mess, and then she saw the old woman struggling to bend over. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Before Ellie could reply, Izzy had put her own handbag and portfolio on a nearby chair and was on her knees, quickly and efficiently gathering the crumpled papers. "Don't you worry about it," Izzy said with a warm smile. "It happens to the best of us. Here, let me get that for you." As they picked up the last of the trash together, Izzy looked at Ellie. "You work too hard. You should be home resting." Ellie, staying in character, just shook her head. "A woman's got to do what a woman's got to do," she said, her voice raspy. Izzy's smile softened with empathy. She patted Ellie's arm gently. "Well, you take care of yourself, you hear," she said, before picking up her things and heading for the elevator, leaving Eleanor standing alone in the silent hallway. Eleanor watched her go, a single triumphant tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. The test was over. The results were clear. One woman had seen a mess, the other had seen a human being. Madison's ambition made her blind to humanity. Izzy's humanity was the source of her strength. It was the quality Eleanor had built her empire on, the quality she feared had been lost in her own family. Now she knew it wasn't lost. It was just hidden away in a small cubicle, fueled by late-night tea and a heart of pure gold. Now Eleanor had her answer, but the next step was far more complicated, making her grandson see it too. Julian Vance lived his life at a dizzying altitude. His days were a blur of back-to-back meetings, high-stakes negotiations, and quarterly reports. He was a good CEO, respected for his sharp intellect and his unwavering focus, but his focus was a double-edged sword. It allowed him to see market trends and financial loopholes with perfect clarity, but it made him blind to the people around him. They were assets, liabilities, employees, competitors. He had forgotten how to see them as just people. He was aware of Madison Sinclair, of course. She was ambitious, aggressive, and made it her business to be noticed by him. She would accidentally be in the elevator with him, always ready with a compliment about a recent success. He found her flattery transparent and tiresome, but he recognized her drive. In his world, drive was a valuable commodity. He saw her as a useful tool for the company, but nothing more. There was no warmth there, no connection that felt real. Their interactions were transactions, just like everything else in his life. He was also aware of Isabella Rossi, but in a completely different context. He had seen her work. Her designs for a new marketing campaign had been bold, fresh, and brilliant. They had a soul to them, a human touch that was often missing in corporate branding. He had approved the project personally, making a mental note of her name. He'd passed her in the hallway once and offered a brief, "Good work on the new campaign, Rossi." She had seemed genuinely flustered and pleased, replying with a simple, "Thank you, Mr. Vance, that means a lot." He appreciated her talent, but she was an employee, several rungs down the corporate ladder. In his isolated world, that ladder was a canyon, too wide to cross. As for the cleaning staff, they were utterly invisible to him. He was a man who looked at the horizon, not at the floor. He might have noticed the polished gleam of the marble or the absence of clutter, but he never once stopped to think about the hands that made it so. An old woman with a stooped back and a squeaky cart. She simply didn't register in his reality. He walked past his own grandmother every single day, completely oblivious. He was so busy running the empire she had built that he couldn't see the woman who had built it. One late night, Julian was heading out of his office, his mind still churning over a difficult merger. He felt a familiar pang of emptiness. His penthouse apartment would be dark and silent. Another dinner, eaten alone. He craved something real, a conversation that wasn't about profit margins or shareholder value, but he didn't know where to find it anymore. As he walked down the hall, he saw the designer, Izzy, packing up her things. On an impulse he barely understood, he almost stopped to talk to her, to ask more about her designs. But the moment passed. The invisible wall between CEO and employee went back up. He gave a curt nod and continued on his way, leaving Izzy and the quiet old janitor behind, never realizing he had just walked past the two most important women in his life. He was the king of his castle, but he was also its prisoner, completely unaware that the key to his freedom was hiding in plain sight. As the nights grew colder, a quiet friendship blossomed between Ellie and Izzy. It became their ritual. Izzy would work late, perfecting her designs, and Ellie would time her cleaning route to end near her cubicle. Their conversations started small. They'd talk about the weather, the squeaky cart, the terrible coffee in the break room. But soon they went deeper. Izzy, feeling safe with the unassuming old woman who offered no judgment, began to open up. She talked about her dreams of one day starting her own small design firm, one that helped non-profits and small businesses. She talked about her family, her love for her sick mother, and the financial pressures she was under. She never complained. She just stated things as facts, with a quiet resilience that Eleanor deeply admired. "Some people are born with a safety net," Izzy said one night, looking wistfully out the window at the city lights. "The rest of us just have to learn how to fly without one." Eleanor, in her role as Ellie, shared her own story. She spoke of her late husband, a good, hard-working man. She talked about the hardships of raising a family on a shoestring budget. She poured all of her own life's early struggles before the fortune into the character of Ellie, and in doing so she found herself sharing real wisdom. "Money makes you comfortable," she told Izzy, "but it doesn't make you strong. Strength comes from getting up one more time than you fall down." Izzy would listen, captivated. "You're so wise, Ellie," she'd say. "You should have been a CEO or something." Eleanor would just chuckle, a dry, raspy sound. "Oh, honey, you don't need a fancy title to see the world clearly. Sometimes you see things better from the bottom." During one conversation, Izzy expressed her admiration for the company. "I know it's a huge corporation now," she said, "but you can still feel the original values. Whoever founded this place really cared about quality and people. I try to put that feeling into my designs." Eleanor's heart swelled with pride. This young woman, who had nothing, understood the soul of her company better than any of the executives who sat in the boardroom. She understood the legacy Eleanor had tried to build. She saw the ghost of Eleanor Vance in the machine Julian was running. It was an incredible, validating moment. Eleanor knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that this was the woman. This was the one. She had the grit, the heart, the integrity. She didn't just work for Vance Industries, she embodied its very best ideals. Their friendship was a secret, shared only in the quiet hum of the empty office, a young designer on the rise and an old janitor on her way out. On the surface, they had nothing in common, but in reality, they were two sides of the same coin, strong, resilient women who understood the value of hard work and a kind heart. The bond they formed was real and powerful, and it was about to cause a ripple that would shake the very foundations of Vance Tower. Julian was having a brutal week. The merger was hitting a snag, and the pressure was immense. He found himself working later and later, fueled by caffeine and sheer willpower. One night, long after the building was supposedly empty, he left his office to stretch his legs. The hallways were dark, save for the emergency lighting. As he rounded a corner, he heard voices coming from the design department. One was young and familiar, Izzy Rossi. The other was old and raspy. He stopped, hidden in the shadows, not wanting to interrupt. He was about to turn back when he heard the old woman's voice say something that made him freeze. Izzy was talking about a problem with a new campaign logo. "It just doesn't feel right," she was saying in frustration. "It's technically good, but it has no soul." The old woman, the janitor, was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sometimes, to find the soul of something, you have to look at its foundation. A logo isn't just a picture, it's a promise. What promise is this brand trying to make? Julian's blood ran cold. It was almost a direct quote. Something his grandmother, Eleanor, had drilled into his head when he was just a teenager learning the business. Business isn't about products, Julian. It's about promises. He peeked around the corner. He saw Izzy sitting on her desk and the old janitor, Ellie, leaning on her cart. He had seen her before, a fleeting shape in the background, but he had never truly looked at her. Now, he watched as she spoke. "Don't look at what your competitors are doing," Ellie continued. "Look at the people you're trying to reach. What do they need to feel? Security, excitement, trust? Start there. The image will follow the feeling." It was a masterclass in marketing strategy, delivered by a woman in a janitor's uniform. It was brilliant, insightful, and utterly unexpected. Julian was stunned. Who was this woman? He watched as Izzy's face lit up with understanding. "You're right, Ellie. You're absolutely right." She hugged the old woman spontaneously. "Thank you." Julian ducked back into the shadows, his mind racing. It could be a coincidence, a common saying, but the phrasing, the core philosophy, it was his grandmother's to a T. He walked back to his office, his focus on the merger completely shattered. For the first time, he was thinking about the people who inhabited his building after dark, and specifically, he was thinking about a wise, mysterious old janitor who spoke in the voice of his grandmother. A seed of curiosity had been planted. He found himself looking for her in the hallways the next day. He started noticing the things he had been blind to before. He saw Madison shove past the mailroom guy without a word of apology. He saw Izzy hold the elevator for a flustered intern loaded with boxes, and he kept thinking about that conversation. The janitor's cart no longer had a squeaky wheel. He vaguely wondered who had fixed it, then remembered seeing Izzy with a can of WD-40 at her desk a few days ago. A strange feeling washed over him. It was the feeling of a puzzle coming together, a picture slowly emerging from the fog. The mask of Ellie was beginning to slip, and Julian was finally starting to see beyond the uniform. Eleanor knew the time was right. Julian's curiosity was piqued. He had started to look at Ellie with a questioning gaze. He was seeing, truly seeing for the first time. Now she needed to bring it all together. She needed to put Julian, Izzy, and her own disguised self in the same space and let the truth reveal itself not through words, but through actions. Her plan was simple, but it relied on the one thing she couldn't control, the character of the people involved. Her opportunity came on a stormy Friday night. The wind howled outside Vance Tower, and the rain lashed against the windows. Eleanor knew that many employees, including Julian and Izzy, would be stuck working late to finish projects before the weekend. She also knew the building's old service elevator was prone to getting stuck during power surges. With a small, discreet call to her loyal butler, Arthur, who had a friend in the building's maintenance department, a little power surge was arranged. As she had predicted, Julian and Izzy both ended up leaving their offices around the same time. Madison had already left, having secured a dinner date with a rival executive. As Julian and Izzy walked towards the main elevator bank, Ellie positioned herself nearby, looking frail and a little nervous about the storm. "I'll just wait for the service elevator," she said to no one in particular. "These fancy ones move too fast for my old heart." Izzy overheard her and smiled. "Don't be silly, Ellie. Come on with us. We'll protect you from the big, bad elevator." She gently took Ellie's arm, guiding her into the main car. Julian, surprised by the interaction, followed them in. The doors closed. Just as the elevator began to rise, the lights flickered violently and went out. The car jolted to a halt with a horrible grinding sound. They were trapped. For a moment there was only darkness and the sound of the howling wind. Then Ellie let out a small, convincing whimper of fear. "Oh, my heavens, I'm so scared of the dark." Julian immediately pulled out his phone, its flashlight cutting through the blackness. He was focused and pragmatic, already pressing the emergency button. "We're fine," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "Maintenance will have us out in a few minutes." But it was Izzy's reaction that he watched. She didn't panic, she didn't complain. Her first instinct was to comfort the old woman beside her. She put a reassuring arm around Ellie's shoulder. "Hey, it's okay. We're perfectly safe. Julian's got it under control, right?" She spoke to Ellie in a soft, soothing voice. "Why don't you tell me a story to pass the time? Tell me about your grandkids." Julian watched them in the stark light of his phone. He saw Izzy, a young woman with her own pressures and fears, completely setting them aside to care for a frightened old janitor. He saw genuine compassion, not a performance. In that small, dark, suspended box, he saw more truth than he had ever seen in his brightly lit boardroom. He looked at Ellie, who was looking back at him with eyes that seemed to hold a universe of knowledge. And in those eyes, for the first time, he saw a flicker of something impossibly familiar, a flicker of his grandmother. The elevator was stuck between floors, but Julian's world was shifting completely off its axis. The annual Vance Foundation Gala was the biggest social event of the year. It was a night of dazzling gowns, champagne, and performative charity. Eleanor, with Arthur's help, had arranged everything. She sent a special handwritten invitation to Izzy Rossi, delivered by courier to her desk. The note simply said, "Your character has not gone unnoticed. You belong here tonight. A friend." Izzy, baffled but intrigued, decided to go. She bought a simple but elegant dress off a clearance rack, a stark contrast to the designer gowns that would fill the room. That night, the ballroom was glittering. Julian stood at the center of it all, shaking hands, playing the part of the gracious host. He saw Madison across the room, dripping in diamonds, holding court and making sure everyone saw her talking to him. Then he saw Izzy. She was standing nervously near the entrance, looking beautiful and completely out of place. He felt an inexplicable pull to go to her, to rescue her from the sharks. But before he could move, he witnessed something that stopped him cold. Madison, annoyed that a waiter wasn't fast enough with her champagne, snapped at him. "Do you even know who I am? Get me a fresh glass now," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. The waiter, a young man, just nodded and scurried away, humiliated. At that exact moment, another waiter accidentally bumped into Izzy, spilling a drop of water on her dress. Izzy's reaction was the polar opposite. "Oh, it's totally fine," she said with a laugh, helping the mortified waiter clean the spot with her own napkin. "Don't you worry about it for a second." Julian saw it all. The contrast was a physical blow. It was everything his grandmother had tried to teach him. And then the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Arthur, the butler, walked to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with pride, "it is my profound honor to introduce the heart and soul of Vance Industries, the woman who started it all, Eleanor Vance." A murmur went through the crowd. Eleanor Vance hadn't made a public appearance in years. Then, from the side of the stage, a figure emerged. It was not the stooped, frail Ellie. It was Eleanor. She stood tall, her silver hair styled perfectly, wearing a stunning, elegant gown. She was no longer invisible. She was a queen. A collective gasp swept through the room. Julian's jaw dropped. Madison's face went white with horror. Izzy just stared, her mind trying to connect the dots between the kind old janitor and the powerful matriarch on the stage. Eleanor stepped to the microphone, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Julian, then on Izzy. "Good evening," she began, her voice filled with warmth and authority. "For the past few months, I have been conducting an experiment. I wanted to see our company not from the top down, but from the bottom up. I became a janitor." The room erupted in shocked whispers. "And I learned that true value has nothing to do with a title or a bank account. It's about how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. It's about kindness when no one is watching." Her eyes locked with Izzy's. "It's about offering a cup of tea to a tired old woman." She then looked at Julian. "I wanted to find a treasure for my grandson, not a treasure of gold, but of character, and I found it." The secret was out, the test was complete, and in the stunned silence of the grand ballroom, two worlds had just collided. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Every eye was on Eleanor, then Julian, then the bewildered young woman in the simple dress. Julian felt a whirlwind of emotions, shock, embarrassment, but above all a profound sense of clarity. It all made sense now. The brilliant advice, the knowing glances, the test in the elevator. His grandmother had played the ultimate gambit, not to control him but to open his eyes. He looked at Madison, who was trying to shrink into the background, her face a mask of humiliation. Then he looked at Izzy, who was staring at Eleanor with awe and dawning understanding. He finally understood what his life was missing. It wasn't a new business strategy or a bigger profit margin. It was authenticity. It was heart. His grandmother hadn't just found a wife for him. She had given him a new lens through which to see the world. She had reminded him of the values the company was built on, the values he had forgotten. He felt a surge of love and respect for her that was so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. Ignoring the hundreds of staring faces, Julian walked off the stage. He walked right past Madison without a glance. He walked directly to Izzy. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Mr. Vance, I don't know what to say." Julian smiled, a genuine, warm smile she had never seen before. "Please," he said, his voice soft, "call me Julian. And I think the person you should be talking to is my grandmother." But his eyes told a different story. They told her he was seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time. Later that evening, after the chaos had subsided, the three of them stood on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. Eleanor, Julian, and Izzy. "I suppose my methods were a bit unconventional," Eleanor said with a wry smile. Izzy laughed, a real, heartfelt sound. "Unconventional is one word for it. You are the most incredible person I have ever met, Mrs. Vance." "Eleanor," she corrected gently. Julian turned to Izzy. "My grandmother was right," he said. "She found a treasure. Your kindness, your integrity. That's the real foundation of this company. It's what I want to be a part of." He hesitated for a moment, the powerful CEO suddenly looking vulnerable. "I know this is all insane, but would you be willing to have a cup of coffee with me sometime? No titles, no company business, just Julian and Izzy." Izzy's smile was as bright as the city lights. "I'd like that very much, Julian." Eleanor watched them, her heart full. Her work was done. This wasn't just about finding a partner for her grandson. It was about securing a legacy. A legacy not of steel and glass, but of character and kindness. As Julian and Izzy began to talk, their conversation easy and natural, she knew the future of her family and her company was in the very best of hands. The janitor's test was over, and everyone had gotten exactly what they deserved. The real wealth, she thought, was never about the money you have, but about the people you have to share it with. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more powerful life lessons every week.